past 30 Eastern. We're going to start the recording on the call. Thanks everyone for coming to the July 2020 NWBA Town Hall meeting. My name's Will Waller and I'm the CEO of the NWBA. I'm really excited to have over 140 people already dialed in for what we think is a compelling agenda. We've got a variety of topics. We're going to pull the presentation up here now. Hopefully you all can see it. If you don't mind moving forward to the agenda slide. Just as a protocol for everyone, if you don't mind keeping your mic on mute throughout the course of the call. If you have a question, we'd prefer you enter it into the chat box. With this size of an audience, it's going to be really hard to field questions verbally. The chat box, you can see the icon at the top right of the screen. So feel free to type your questions in there. We're going to have people monitoring the chat box throughout the course of the call. As you can see on the agenda, we've got a variety of items to cover, so we're going to dive in. The first item is a prior season recap. After that, we've got an update on the NWBA financials. We're going to share with you some information on the webinar series, which hopefully some of you have had a chance to cover live or recording that we've posted online. We have an update on a coach education initiative that's currently underway, as well as give you a quick update on Athlete Advisory Council, which we communicated roughly 3 to 4 weeks ago. And then I think what most people have come for is an update on the 2020-2021 season. And then after that, we'll have time at the end for questions and answers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the president of the NWBA, Tim Fox. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Will. Again, as Will said, would like to welcome everybody to the July 2020 town hall meeting of the membership. And at this point in time, first of all, I just want to thank all the members. The 2019-2020 season, although cut a bit short prior to a few of the national championships being able to be held, it was once again another great and special season. And again, we're a member-driven organization. We can't do this without each other. So I want to thank everybody for everything that they did to make that such a success. First off, just want to congratulate the national champions that and the championships that we could hold out in Wichita. Want to thank in no particular order, and congratulate in Division III Brooks Ballers for bringing home their first championship, and Division II Tampa Bay Strong Dogs, and then in Division I. Definitely not, no stranger to winning this, but Dallas Wheelchair Mavericks for bringing home another title within Division I. In addition, just to kind of recap and look at last season, we need to thank all the teams who trained, competed, worked very hard in their communities to represent the name that's across your chest. And we all do it very, very well. But thank you to all of you who participated and made it such a wonderful and successful season. Again, not just past the athletes, we have all the non-athletes, the coaches, the officials, the classifiers, our event directors, our divisional leaderships. There's thousands of volunteers who put in so much time and energy every year to make our season successful. So we need to say thank you to them. Congrats as well to all the men and women who qualified for Tokyo 2020, which is obviously now due to COVID-19 is 2021, but congratulations to all the hard work, the effort and energy to get where you are today. I think we'd be remiss without saying, one of our goals, and we stated this last August, was to truly disclose, be more transparent, change the title a little bit, hearing what the members were requesting from the board, from the NWBA office. And we felt we've made very strong progress over the course of the 2019-2020 season, including the financials and the policies and procedures. There's many thanks that need to be passed around for that. Number one, if you're logged into the NWBA website, you can look at and see the 2019 990. It is posted for our members to review. A big thanks needs to be put out to Brandon for all his efforts and all the energy that he put in to make that possible. In addition, Mike Godsey, who's the board treasurer, countless volunteer hours to also get there. In addition to the 990, we also have been posting quarterly financials, so you have the ability to see where we are as an organization and the continued growth and strength that we continue to put in there. For most people's information, some people ask, where do we find some of this info? If you go to the NWBA.org and you look and you click on About Us and you click on Board of Directors, you're going to see a variety of critical documents and how we govern the organization. We always encourage everybody to visit that location because it does contain our bylaws, our policies, procedures, meeting minutes, financials, etc. And obviously, we know we want to get to the meat of the agenda, which is probably towards the end of this. So we wanted to keep this short and brief to kind of recap what took place. And with that being said, I am going to hand it over to Mike Godsey, who's been serving as the treasurer for roughly about the last year and truly has created a positive impact within the organization. He brings ample supply of what we call positive friction, as he also likes to phrase that. And he has been a breath of fresh air to the board over the past year. So with that being said, Mike, I'm going to kick it over to you so we can get into the meat of the financials.
Hi, everybody. Brandon, if you could switch to the next slide. So this is kind of the January to June, the first 6 months of 2020. It's important to know that 2019, we were able to actually make a profit for the first time in 8 years. The prior 7 years, we had lost about $1.4 million. And my constructed friction that Tim was mentioning is you eat what you kill. You can't spend money that you haven't already generated, and that's just being fiscally responsible. So you might ask, well, how could we do that when we've already lost $71,000 year to date? Cash flow wise, we're actually positive a bit because we get funding from the USOPC, and we've actually negotiated with them to get that money sooner in the year. So these numbers reflect removing some of the USOPC dollars. Total income so far, $302,000. Total expenses, $374,000. There's probably another $150,000 in there, which is to the positive, which is specifically earmarked for high performance teams. This year, that information or that the ability to spend those dollars have been pretty much stalled completely because of COVID-19. But we will have an obligation to spend the money on high performance at the USOPC's direction as things kind of open up. Brandon, if you could switch to the next slide. All right, so now there's a couple of different scenarios here for 2020 forecast. The first one, if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, is a 40% reduction in registration. This is just from a forecasting model, what I've said is 40% reduction related to teams and individual members directly. You can see there's a total income of $682,000, total expenses of $730,000, net income, and this would include our other obligations, but we would lose $48,000. The middle of the screen, you've got a 20% reduction in registration. That's around a break even, and then on the far right would be no reduction in registration, which I think would be unlikely in our current COVID environment, but it's something that we want to strive for. We've made a lot of great improvements over the last probably 18 months as an organization, getting some new leadership with Will being the brightest example of that. And we're just going to continue being good stewards of the investments that we make, the partnerships that we're able to make that Will talk about. He loves to talk about that, so please ask him questions and point people in his direction. He would love to share this wonderful sport with other potential partners. Next up is going to be Christina Schwab, who's going to talk to us about the webinar series.
Okay, so hi everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Christina Schwab, was Christina Rip. For those of you that don't know me, I am a coach. I've been part of the NWBA actually since 1991, so a really long time. I've been a member of this organization. And right now, I am working on my practicum for my master's degree in athletic administration. So when this came up, I reached out to Will to see if I could do anything for the organization. To me, it's really important to be able to give back, and wanted to kind of learn, the administrative side of, helping out with a national governing body. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about our webinar series. And so in this slide, as many of you will remember, the team reps were surveyed back in May. And one of the questions was topics that, team reps wanted to learn about. So we started to brainstorm about different webinar sessions that we could put together that are going to be beneficial to your programs, to coaching, everything that goes along with wheelchair basketball. So the sessions that we're having are going to be focused primarily on the top ranked items that came out of that survey. You can switch slides, Brandon. And so we kicked off the webinar series a couple weeks ago with a webinar on grants, grant writing, and securing grants. And so I want to thank Darlene Hunter and Cheryl Vines for kicking off the series. It went really, really well. I was really happy with that, and I know we were as an organization, and the feedback to date has been really positive on that. If you aren't able to make it to our webinar series, like live, they are posted on the NWBA website, so make sure you check those out. And then just wanted to let you know that tomorrow we want you to tune back in because we'll have our second session on coaching education. That info can be found online and social media, and Will's going to talk more about that in a little bit. So we can switch slides now. And so we're excited to announce the upcoming sessions that you can see here. We're going to have some about season management, athlete safety, and some donors and fundraising. But most importantly, we want to be able to give you valuable information. So if you have any more topics that you'd like to see covered, see included in this webinar series, don't hesitate to send something out to Brandon or even reach out to myself if you'd like. And we'd love to, get that put into our schedule. So right now I'm going to hand it back over to Will, and he can give you the preview on coach education.
Thanks, Christina, and thanks for reaching out to the NWBA to figure out how we could put you to work for your practicum. You've been adding incredible value, so we really do appreciate you getting the webinar series off the ground. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. This topic here of coach education is going to be really brief. The first thing I wanted to do is just recognize the people who have stepped up to be a member of the committee. Hopefully these faces and names are familiar to many of you, but Stephanie Wheeler from the University of Illinois, Andrea Woodson, who's professor and Dr. Andrea Woodson-Smith, who's playing an active role. She's also the vice chair of the Athlete Advisory Council. Coach Glatch from Edinburgh University has been on the team with us. And then we have Mary Allison Cook from Lakeshore Foundation, Trice Ham, who's been a big part of the Hot Wheels program down in Houston and is our conference commissioner for the junior division. And then the one and only Christina Schwab as well. So just a quick, next slide, please. A quick FYI to you, when we talk about coach education, what do we mean? I'll give the slide a moment to change. There's three main components to it. The first component is what we call the American Development Model. And essentially that's a structured approach for athletes and or coaches to see where they fit in, where can they enter the sport of wheelchair basketball, and how can they progress to different levels. So it's really articulating what people can expect at those different levels and ultimately attaching tools to help them progress to the different levels that they want to go. So those tools are the training and development components that would be outlined for the different phases. Another specific component of what we're doing in coach education is literally working on revising our tools and developing a lot of online resources and e-learning that can help our coaches learn the fundamentals of two things. First and foremost, what does it mean to be an effective coach in general, but then also helping them learn the tactics and techniques related to being a great wheelchair basketball coach. So it's going to be eventually a progressive set of materials that we're arming coaches with to make sure that they can give our athletes a great experience, but so that they can also get a great experience too. And then the third bucket that we're working on in here is skill development. So there's an application called Mobile Coach that the USOPC, which stands for the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, that they have for different sports like ours. And what we're going to be doing is developing content and materials that can help coaches learn different skills, but also so that directly from the app, our athletes will have an opportunity to pull up their iPhone or their Android or tablet in a gym, see a video on a specific drill, see a PDF on a specific drill, and then be able to practice those things directly in the gym. Later phases of the initiative are going to be focused on small group activity and team concepts. Next slide, please. One of the things I wanted to share with all of you is something that is going to be announced tomorrow. So this is confidential until tomorrow, and that's the CAF NWBA training zone, and it's presented by Nike. And it's going to be our first endeavor into putting some of this skill development content out on Mobile Coach. And we've got a little video here to give you a sense of what we're talking about. You click that.
Legendary.
I think there's a significant lag going on, Allison. Maybe you could pause it and I'll just describe a little bit more and let people know what to look for to find it. Apologies if you can't hear it that well, everyone. So apologies if that was unclear, everyone. We're going to make sure you get a chance to see it. If you follow our social media tomorrow, as well as the website, we're going to be posting information on a little bit more. You'll see a more high resolution video. But essentially with CAF and Nike's support, we're going to be launching some very targeted skill videos that we're going to be putting out on the tool that I referred to a little while called Mobile Coach. The content will also be available on the CAF and NWBA websites. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gail Gang, who's going to talk to us briefly about the Athlete Advisory Council, which we launched several weeks back. So with that, Gail, it's all yours.
Hi, Will. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Gail Gang. For those that don't know me, I have been part of the NWBA and have been an athlete for quite a while now. I've pretty much played from prep all the way to Team USA, and I recently just had the honor of being the Athlete Advisory Council chairman. So the Athlete Advisory Council really consists of 4 other members plus Steve Serio, who is the USOPC rep. And, you know, we have a great group together and a lot of different backgrounds with wheelchair basketball and in other situations, in other, you know, expertise. But pretty much what the Athlete Advisory Council is, we're trying to be the middleman between our board and our membership, so our athletes. Our board has been great at really trying to get the athlete voice heard, and so with that, Andrea, who Will has mentioned earlier, she's my vice chairman, and so Andrea and I are actually going to be, we're the newest board members. So our board has done a great job, like I said earlier, of just really kind of making sure that our athlete voice is heard. A few responsibilities, as you can see on the slide, is, like I said, just really that middleman between our membership and our board, bringing that athlete voice, making sure we're being heard, as well as, actively participating with big strategic initiatives and, overall growth of the NWBA. Our next most pressing issue is going to be, we have one more role to fill for the AAC, and so we're excited to find our last member of the AAC to kind of round out what a great council that we have already. I just want to say I'm honored, I'm excited, really blessed to be able to give back to a great organization that has helped me out throughout my career and my life. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. But next, I'm going to pass it over to Brandon. He's going to be talking about season planning.
Maybe I'm you, Brandon. Hey, Brandon, you may be on mute. Just give him one more second if.
Hello?
Hey, there you go. Thanks, Brandon. Go right ahead.
I apologize. I think I was on mute there. Guy running things. So we're now to the meat of the presentation. Just wanted to say that, this is obviously where season, which this discussion started back a number of months ago and has since, filtered through various levels of the NWBA. I think the biggest thing illustrating the visual right here is, we started back in initial conversations with the board of directors in early May, mapping out what could look like, knowing that, it was still early on in the COVID pandemic, understanding it was something that we needed a plan for. And with that, we understood to make those decisions, data-driven decisions, and we wanted to solicit feedback from team representatives because they have a good pulse on what's happening with the athletes and teams in their athletes member regions. And after soliciting that feedback, which we'll go over here in a second, we with a discussion with collective divisional leadership. So this is each of the divisions, senior leadership for each of those, and then divisions, circling back again and drilling down more into the broader membership and better pulse on where we stand, really getting and then having, again, follow-up discussions with additional leadership with the board and divisions out for the best possible season for 2020, 2021, knowing that there is but knowing that uncertainty for our members, we need to put some structure in place. So with feedback, and this is where talking about the feedback, where a lot of our decision making from the division leadership, conference commissioners up to division commissioners up to the board and staff, we wanted to solicit that feedback so to start that team rep survey, a good range of team reps across the divisions, and the interesting takeaways from survey on that it was a minimal impact on registrations. 1 out of 10 team reps felt at the time in the survey have an impact on them registering or not. From that, we've definitely taken in membership opportunities presented when there was a request in there for a return to play, which we'll be discussing later, and then requests for topics. We took that opportunity to gather some data and provide some information back to you members during this downtime. When we're not playing on the court, but we can make you better off the court with these presentations. And then over on the membership side, I think the glaring thing that we found was 8 out of 10 members that completed that survey intend to compete, and 2/3 of that group intend to fully complete, including if invited. So attending national, there's obviously interest in there for you guys to play, and so I think that's where we're gonna get into here later. We can make that happen for the power season. And then I would be remiss to point out that one of the things that COVID has people, and 1/3 of our members said they've had an employment impact. So that's something later that talking about how we took that into account. We'll be consideration of leadership and making decisions leading into the season. So just kind of giving you a great visual, one showing kind of that member participation in that survey, from athletes to parents, from coaches to team reps. We had a broad range of participation in that survey. And again, I'd point out hand side there, all the way over to really 80% that planned to participate, and notably there was 16% at that point. So definitely a group there that had some level of uncertain, but not really. I think driving the decision that we need to create this allowing that participation opportunity for. And then looking more regionally, as we are, a national organization represented across 42 Canada and Puerto Rico. This really shows that at the time of the survey, where some of those stood on their participation levels. Obviously with COVID, you're probably looking at this graph. There's a reality that exists from state to state. And it differs in maybe some hotbeds, and we understand that. I think one of the things that Will's going to get into later here is, we are completely understanding. There's no perfect that answer for all. I think that it's going to look different for each state, each region. I think that each team just calls out the attention that there is a difference that exists there, but there's really still that intent that people want to participate throughout this coming season. So I think the next thing to pass off to is Will, and he's going to talk about 2020-2021 season planning.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it. Before I dive into the content on this slide, I just want to take a moment and thank Tim Caldwell. He really spent a lot of time helping us not only design the surveys that went out to team reps as well as to membership, but also aggregating and cutting all of the data to help us get a very specific picture of what the different membership types were saying and feeling, as well as what the reality is by the different geographies as well. So this slide's a little bit busy, and just to reinforce the point, we are going to make sure that this information is available to everyone. So So we will make sure, if you can't see it, that it is available. But if you focus first of all on the top right portion of the screen, basically what you'll see there are a variety of scenarios, if you will. So during the course of our discussions over the course of May, June, and July with the different levels of leadership, one of the things they asked is for us to come back and present different options to the organization. So the options that are there are looking at a standard season. So, you know, what we would typically see late September through end of March, early April, a modified season, and then a third option that we put forward was no season at all. So as we went through the discussions and looking at all of the data, the first thing that we put forward was the modified season, and that's based off of a variety of different factors. And first of all, I see some questions coming in on the data and whatnot. We're going to have a Q&A section at the end, Carolyn, and I think that's Melissa Oberst, but we will be able to answer some of those questions as we get to the end of the session. But the modified season, which is where we've landed, basically gives us later registration dates for individuals and for teams. It makes the season available for those who want to compete and can compete, keeping in mind that we're trying to serve a very diverse population of individuals. So if you think about where we're represented in the U.S., we're covering 42 different states, all of which have a different reality. So, you know, what our intent is to provide the season for those who want and can compete, but putting more flexibility into the deadlines that we would typically have. And secondly, related to those deadlines, excuse me, making sure that we're not penalizing anyone with late fees or things of the like. So, you know, typically what we would have had in a standard season is once you get past certain milestones, we would have implemented a price increase for individual registrations and for team registrations. And we didn't want to penalize anyone who ended up registering late. Secondly, you can see on the bottom right-hand side of this slide that we had an originally communicated multi-year dues structure for membership, and that was communicated originally in the summer of 2018. Last year we froze the fees, and we're freezing those fees again because we want to be considerate of the feedback we saw, which is the fact that you know, people are having some impact employment-wise related to COVID, and we know there may be some impact related to donors and things like that. We're also talking with the divisions in the various discussions we're having for them to look at ways in their guidelines to make sure that they're providing flexibility as well. An example of that might be looking at the number of games required for a team to be eligible for postseason play. And you know, if in a regular year the minimum number of games would be 10, we're looking at whether or not there's flexibility for them to put a lower required number of games in order to enable that for them to still be able to go. So what that means is if a team decided to start competing later, they wouldn't be penalized by the shortened period of time because of a number of game threshold that they had to hit. And then the last point, which I think is important, especially coming off of the 2019-2020 season, is related to nationals. We really didn't have a lot of flexibility last season to make changes in the moment because COVID kind of impacted us pretty quickly. But what we've been doing with our vendors is making sure that we can have some flexibility on nationals. So Brandon, if you don't mind hitting the next slide. Thank you, Brandon. So hopefully by now all of you have seen some information relative to the 2021 national schedule. So 2 points there. Number one, we wanted to make sure that you saw the dates and the sequence. What we have on the screen here is intercollegiate division beginning on Thursday, March 11th through Saturday, March 13th, taking place in Wichita with the support of the American Collegiate Society for Adaptive Athletics. For those of you who know Rob Egan, he runs that organization. The women's division would have their championship Friday, March 19th to Sunday, March 21st. And Ability 360 would be the host in Phoenix, Arizona for that. And then for adult and junior, the plan would be to go back to Wichita Thursday, March 25th through Sunday, March 28th. Couple of points, you know, a couple of those partners didn't really get the opportunity to fully host the national tournament event. And so our goal is to try to give those same local organizing committees the opportunity to do that. The point that I made earlier on flexibility for nationals, we're thinking that we would be able to push nationals out if need be by, let's say, 30 to 45 days roughly in order to make sure that if there was some delay in the season or some type of a lockdown that were to happen, that we can still provide a national tournament experience to as many of our divisions as possible. That being said, we know that we need to develop a very clear cutoff date because teams schedule travel, teams do a variety of other things. Teams do a variety of other planning in order to make sure that they're getting the lowest rates possible for some of these logistics related to it. So we're going to develop whatever that cutoff is and communicate it in a timely fashion so that we know we're getting information out to you as quickly as possible. So that's the nationals dates. Brandon, if you don't mind hitting the next slide. Return to play. So on this subject, the point that is most important here is that with the 42 state coverage that we have, as well as having some athletes up in Canada, if we're eventually allowed to go back and forth, it's really difficult to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution on return to play guidelines that's tailored just to wheelchair basketball. So because of that, our primary focus is going to be on the following: understanding as individuals and teams within the organization what the guidance is from your local health organization, whether that's a city, a county, or a state. Many of you have an affiliation to a parent organization like a hospital, a rec association, or Parks and Rec rather, a university. And obviously you all need to make sure that you're following their guidance. And in lieu of either of those things, we think that the best thing that we can do is direct people to the national experts in our country, which is the Center for Disease Control. So Brandon, next slide. So with that, you know, there are a few points that we wanted to make. You know, that overall, this is going to be about accountability and diligence, again, as clubs and individuals. And each team and member is going to need to display the highest level of consideration towards what the local health officials are saying. And we need individuals to understand what that risk is. Center for Disease Control classifies basketball as a close contact sport. And the reality is only you as athletes or only you as a coach or a member of the association understands what your personal risk factors are. I think what we've seen or what we know is that there's not one specific health reality that exists for the 2,400 athletes that we have within the NWBA or the 3,000 members. If you have concerns or it's even questionable in your mind whether or not you should be competing, we think that you should be seeking the opinion of a professional. We think that people having a respect beyond even their own physical condition, but a respect for your teammates, your program, and the game overall is going to be critical. And everyone making sure that you're spending time familiarizing yourself with the symptoms and your own condition is going to be important. Something that we wanted to make sure we were clear about is, what we've been hearing from the insurance providers as well. The common feedback that we've heard from the insurance providers is that there is not coverage for liability and accident claims related to COVID-19, regardless of timing, return to play protocols, or the government mandate. And the specific language that they've said is that communicable disease are common insurance exclusions, where pandemics are also traditionally not covered. So we wanted to make sure that we were sharing that with all of you directly. Now, obviously, our insurance is going to cover everything else that it traditionally covers, but we wanted to make sure that we were sharing that information with all of you. Next slide, Brandon. So what our goal is going to be from a return to play guidelines perspective is to make sure that we're consolidating the various sources of information in a one-stop shop, but that we're not going to create a set of protocols that supersede what these professional health organizations say. They're the experts for the reason. We're not going to create something that is going to interfere or contradict what those expert organizations have to say. So we have a site on the NWBA page where we're going to begin to consolidate even more of this information. But we found a few things helpful, a few different links very helpful. So obviously there's general information on the homepage for the Center for Disease Control, but there's also a link that we put in here where if you click on it, it's going to take you to a list of all of the state and tribal areas, what the guidelines are for each of those directly. And then we're going to reinforce some of the items that we've put out before relative to recognizing the symptoms and the like. We've also had access to a wealth of information from the US OPC related to COVID-19 and their perspective. Much of what they have to say, just like a variety of the other organizations that we've benchmarked, all of them say, that people should defer primarily to the local health organization and or the CDC. So this is going to be consistent regardless of what group of information you look for. So as a overall sort of summary, as we think about return to play, we want individuals to defer to the experts, and we want to make sure that we're housing this information in a very clean and summarized way for you. As we think about returning to the season, we're freezing the dues, we're extending or we're delaying the start slightly, and we're eliminating late fees and things like that. And we've also worked with the LOCs of our national tournaments to make sure that if need be, we can slide out our national tournaments. At the end of the day, as we think about return to play, we want to create an opportunity for our athletes and our teams and other members to be able to play the sport. And we want to create as much flexibility, including with the divisions, in order to allow it. And then just continue to emphasize the experts' information on the how. So with that, I think it's time for the Q&A. I think the best thing may be to review some of the questions that are in the chat, and then if there are others, we can potentially answer those. If people just keep entering them, I guess is the best way to say it in the chat room. So I'm going to go in reverse order. Paul Stewart, I see your question in here. Will teams be penalized if they decide to skip the year? The answer to that is no, Paul. We respect 100% people's right to compete or not to compete. So we're not going to penalize teams or individuals. We know it's a very personal choice. So no. So the question from Joseph Empel, fees were frozen except for non-player registration. Let me explain that. It's a good question. I apologize. I meant to cover that on the slide. The reason why non-athletes there's going to be a $10 increase for those individuals is because the cost of our required background checks has gone up from the vendor. So all we're doing is passing through that incremental expense. We're not tacking on an extra amount on there. We're just passing through what that price increase is. So it's not per se, you know, an administrative extra from the NWBA as much as it is us passing through that incremental fee. I know it's still an increase to you at the end of the day, but that's the driver for that increase. So I appreciate you asking the question. I'm gonna go to, looks like Brandon answered Michelle's. I'm trying to. Rosemary, I see your question in there. Once you do a background check, wouldn't NWBA be notified if something comes up later? Our policy from a minor abuse and prevention policy perspective, and the requirement that comes down both from the US OPC, but also their policies are going to be are driven by Congress. So that's ultimately where that comes from, that we have to do that background check annually. So that's the policy that we work with and that we have to honor. And will there be a page listed where teams can announce their participation? I don't think there's going to be a different page than we typically have. So what we have on our website now through Sport Engine and its linkage to our website is a list by division of what teams have registered. So if people go there and they don't see a team registered on there, then by definition that means that they're sitting out the year. And certainly by all means, if you don't see them on there, you can feel free to reach out to them. Tommy asked a question here. Are we going to be sending out another survey regarding org's feelings on considering the recent spike in cases? Tommy, I think the way that we think about it is there's roughly a 3-week lag in the survey. So if we were to dust off the survey today, think about the execution period, think about the roll-up period and analysis, and think about the report out, we automatically have a 3-week window. So every time we bring a new survey and the new results forward, it's automatically going to be to a point where someone can rightfully say, hey, don't you think those are a little bit old? I think the other point is that what we might have heard from New York a month or 6 weeks ago might be different than what we're hearing in that region today, based on their results. And what we would have heard from Texas 6 weeks ago might be different than what we hear from Texas now. I don't necessarily think that it's a 1-for-1. I'm not a statistical analysis expert, but the point is that there's going to be positive fluctuations and negative fluctuations. And the reality is those fluctuations won't consistently cover the US in the same way. And so the overarching point here is that we're trying to come up with a solution that allows people to pause if they want to pause. That's why we've removed some of the fees and whatnot that we talked about. Maybe they can register later if the information changes. And we're also creating an environment where if people are in an environment where it is safe to play, then they have an opportunity to do that. And also what we're trying to do is make sure that we're trying to add value in other ways. So what you're seeing from a webinar series perspective, coach education perspective, and things like that, we're trying to make sure that we're bringing other solutions to the organization to help them create either more skill for themselves or more benefit for their program. It won't be a perfect list by any stretch of the imagination, but we are leaning in and doing our best to try to create other value for people too. TN to everyone. If we have games, has there been any discussion how visitors, spectators be handled, family and friends? I think the reality is that on local public health sites as well as on CDC, there's going to be guidance on that. So there's a very explicit section on the CDC site for people who put on events. And in that section, it gives perspective from a CDC point of view on group size. I think you all probably have heard, you know, until you're tired of hearing it, that each state has, you know, limited large group, small group, medium group. So those counties define what the maximum group size is. And that maximum group size is really going to impact how many people you can bring to an event. And really that ends up painting I think, a picture of the complexity, right? It's really county by county, and coming up with, you know, a county by county approach for everyone is really rather difficult. Joe, I see you have a question on safe sport fees being postponed. The dues are the dues that I told you, freezing the dues. The only increase at all, the only increase is for non-athletes, the incremental $10, which is the $10 expense related to the background, the incremental $10 expense for the background check. Brian R., what would be the threshold of COVID-19 infections nationally to dictate cancellation of the season? I think it would be another lockdown would dictate the cancellation of the season. I don't know that it's a percentage of infection or an absolute number of infection. So that's the way we think about it. Brandon, I'm trying to hit the questions that are coming, but luckily a lot more questions are coming in, so I apologize if I missed anyone's question. If a team sits out for a year, is that player on that team eligible to play for a different team that is going to play? Transfer rules still apply, so people are still eligible to transfer to another team. So there's no issue with people making changes. You know, something we've talked about that we don't necessarily have a firm perspective on is, you know, let's say that happened in a relatively noticeable way where there's all kinds of transfers going on. Our hope is that once we get back to normal, that people reset and go back to those teams so we can still get the same number of teams that we had in the preceding years. Yes, people can transfer. They have to follow the transfer guidance within the divisions, and they're looking at that division by division. And you know, we're thinking through, you know, how do we get back to normal after that? Sarah Kerwin, is there a plan for women player recruitment if the registrations go down and players don't come back? We had actually a discussion with a few members of the women's national team who've reached out to some other veterans in the women's division. And there's a couple of leaders who are going to step up and help us think through how do we attract, develop, and retain more of our female athletes. So I don't have a specific plan to share with you right now, Sarah, but there has been discussion with a group of committed female athletes to help us look at that in a greater level of detail. TN, like nationals, has there been discussion about random tournaments hosted by NWBA? TN, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is, if that's someone from Tennessee or someone with the first name, letter T in their name, but we've had a lot of discussion that the practical outcome of the COVID reality is likely going to be a lot more regional tournaments and likely smaller size tournaments. And the like, particularly in the near term as we continue to work our way through the COVID reality. As it relates to NWBA owned events that we're putting forward, you know, we definitely want to host more NWBA owned events. Owned is a loose term, but you know, events that we're organizing and putting on. But our first priority is to make sure that we you know, agreed on this dues structure of freezing the dues except for non-athletes, agreeing on the flexibility both at a national office level as well as at a divisional level, and then trying to create other value for all of you. But we've got it on our list to try to create more of those. Has there been a discussion on how this will affect the junior division as parents may be hesitant to return to play? When we looked at the survey results, there wasn't a significant difference in the response from parents versus the response from athletes. Now that's obviously always going to be subject to sample size and response rate and all of that. Our membership survey overall, I believe, had 800 responses, so we felt like it was a statistically significant and reliable group size. But the original feedback from the parents in that survey didn't make us think that there would be a significant difference there or not. Now that doesn't mean that the reality might not be different, but that's at least what the data suggested to us. IMAC is an official, I believe, asking about officials who work weekend after weekend. Yeah, officials should follow CDC guidelines, just like players should follow it, and whatnot. So the answer to that one is yes. Jeff, your question on NWBA insurance coverage, Jeff Townsend. Are local organizing committees responsible for any type of complaints, lawsuits, and whatnot? I don't think the local organizing committees will be. You know, we're going to have a waiver that's going to have language in it, Jeff. But I think the difficulty that insurance companies have on COVID is really being able to trace it to that specific event. So if you think about people coming in from out of town, traveling, stopping at a gas station, going to the hotel, hitting a restaurant, going to the gym, and so on and so forth, being able to say with precision that a potential COVID transmission happened as a result of that competition is difficult. So I think that's the difficulty that insurance companies are having. And then secondly, to reinforce it, the waiver language will have content in there related to COVID. Welcome. Victoria, what is the plan for positive test reporting and contract tracing? I think as far as the COVID conditions are concerned, first and foremost, what the CDC language is going to say is that people should, not compete if they're feeling ill or feeling any of the symptoms. If they do get ill, making sure that they leave the competition or the practice or the event, and then communicating with individuals with whom they practiced or been in contact. So taking a proactive step, if you're someone who comes up positive, taking the proactive step to notify the others so that they can get tested. At a high level, that's what the CDC guidance says. Mara, sorry. Does NWBA plan to create scenarios based on different levels of COVID-19 spread and how it impacts how wheelchair basketball is played, especially how the sport can be played with physical distancing and number of athletes? Mara, that's defined in the local health organization guidelines. They really break it out. If you look, it comes up sport by sport, and they'll talk about small group versus large group, individual training before you get into group sessions and things like that. Those experts lay out the progression of return to play by type of sport. And so it would be very specific in there with information. And again, that's why we want to refer them to those guidelines. Hey, Dan, the answer is teams will not be penalized. Neither will individuals, by the way. Robert had a statement. Thank you, Robert. Joseph, IMAC, got those. Got Jeff. Matt Schneider, hello, Matt. There is a nationwide, just moved on me. Nationwide shortage of officials, which COVID could certainly impact. Have there been any discussions on ways to keep officials safe while also engaging with teams and enforcing rules properly? What plans are in place if there is an increased shortage of officials? Will there be any checks, balances in place for event caps in a given weekend? Matt, relative to the question on officials, we think that the officials are a group that we need to think through the safety of them and emphasize the safety of them and the self-regulation for them, just as we would any other group. I think from a planning perspective, we haven't got into like a statistical analysis that says if this number of officials and this number of teams and put together 10 different scenarios, because we don't know what the number of registered teams and all of that are going to be. But our intent is not to put officials in a position that they don't want to be in. I think the practical side of it is, as I said earlier, events are likely to have fewer teams. They're likely to be more regional centric, particularly in the near term, say the first half to 2/3 of the season. So I think that's likely going to alleviate a lot of the reality. So I don't really see there being per se a major, but there's more analysis that needs to go into it. Hopefully that helps. Thank you, Ryan. The season is canceled. Dave Stanger. Amy. Alex, if the season is canceled at any point, would collegiate players be given an additional year of eligibility? That's a question for the intercollegiate division leadership. The NWBA doesn't render those types of decisions for each division. If they made a decision and someone wanted to appeal it, then it goes up the ladder to the national organization. Brandon, any major ones that you think I should hit that I haven't hit? I want to be respectful. I know people are beginning to drop off slowly. It's 9:36. I want to also respond to something pressing if we haven't.
I'm thinking, I'm going through them. I don't think I'm trying to check them off.
I mean, while you're looking, Brandon, I guess what I want to say is I really appreciate this is a record amount of turnout for a communication. It makes sense that we would get a record turnout in the environment that we're living in, but it's not lost on me that people have sacrificed, you know, part of their evening to spend with the NWBA and hear from us and ask really good questions. So I want to thank all of you for that. And maybe to be respectful of people's time, if folks want to drop off, they can drop off. If folks want to stay on and ask a specific question, I'm happy to answer specific questions for people as well. So feel free if you want to drop off. You won't be penalized. Just kidding. You won't be penalized. And for other questions, happy to answer those.
All right, we got a couple
Roy,
more.
about how many sanctioned games are you anticipating the numbers being compared to previous years? I think that's going to vary by division, Troy. And I think the bigger question is how many games are required for teams to be eligible for nationals. We don't have the exact number by division. We believe it will be less per division, however. So we don't want to put so much of a burden in a unpredictable year. So we think with teams registering late that we need to be flexible on the number. Heather, masks and temp checks will be based off of guidance from the local health organization. Thank you, Jeff, as well. Thank you, Nate. Will division change if teams decide to not play for this year? We don't foresee structural changes to our divisions. So hopefully that answers your question. Lauren, you asked a question on why are we, you reinforced Molly's question on why are we leaving return to play plans up to local teams? I would say it's different than that. What we're doing is leaving return to play up to local health and federal health organizations. We're deferring to the most local level of expertise and the national level of expertise. Our intent isn't to come up with anything that differs at all from the experts. So we're also providing direct links with where people can access the information for their state health organization. So the intent isn't to abdicate our responsibility. The intent is to point people in the right direction. So hopefully that answers it, Molly. All right. I think that's it. Thank you, Mike. Sarah, without division set of guidelines, how do we see, without a division-wide set of guidelines, how do we see the season actually playing out? In a very fluid way with more flexibility than ever before in order to give people an opportunity to compete, who want to compete, and give people the safety. If they don't want to compete, give them the option not to, but hopefully add other value to those individuals that they may want to be involved in some level or another this season with the NWBA. All right. Well, I haven't been on a hot seat like that for quite some time. Keeping my blood pressure sharp. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Brandon, maybe with that, I don't know if you want to copy and paste the chat section, Brandon, so we can get back to people if we missed anything. We're going to post this recording for people tomorrow. And we will also post the presentation online. If you think of questions after the fact, please don't hesitate at any point to reach out to me at will@nwba.org. And by now, I think everyone already has Brandon's email, so I won't repeat that. But thank you all so much once again for your time and your commitment and all the hours that you volunteer to the sport. And thank you for being flexible with us as we work through what will undoubtedly be an unprecedented season. Thank you so much. Thank you, Frog. Thanks, Melissa, Forrest, Matt, Mike, Gwenna, Greg, Rosemary, Emily, Alex. That was interactive. Doug, Sarah, thank you. Hey, Brandon, you want to ping me after you save the recording? Thanks to you board members for staying on. Appreciate it. Division leaders who might still be on. We'll have a debrief soon. Thanks, guys. Brandon, if I hang up, is it going to delete the recording? Is that a no, Brandon? Are you there, Brandon?